Hey Sham.
Hey Neve, how are you?
Good, good. Welcome. I'm so delighted we're actually getting to sit down and have this conversation. We've been kind of talking about it for a little while.
Yeah, likewise. Really good to see you. And yeah, happy to be talking.
Great. So just for anybody who hasn't met Sham before, it's Sham Burman. Good, got that one right. And Sham has worked in talent acquisition, stroke recruitment for 15 plus years, predominantly in the tech space. I would say Sham and a bit of a stint in financial services. And Sham and I worked together many, many moons ago, and he was definitely one of the best recruiters I had the pleasure of partnering with. And Sham and I reconnected probably a couple of years ago, Sham, when you were on your coaching journey, and we've certainly managed to keep connected through that as we're both in the business of coaching now.
Great.
And I think when we spoke first, it was very much around your passion of seeing people do better. And I love that. That sounds like a real purpose to me. And so delighted that you're going to be here sharing your wisdom today around kind of the 5 things that people can consider if they're choosing to move roles. And I think, certainly, Sham, I don't know about you, I'm going to be 3 years in business in September. And what I noticed for the last 3 years, it's very much around people have gone on vacation, they've had time with their family, they've managed to relax and maybe wind down a little bit. And
Mm.
it naturally gets them to start to think about, oh man, I have to go back to work. They get the sinking feeling, they're feeling the fear, as we'd say in Ireland. I think it's a UK term as well, and so they naturally start to consider, maybe I want to do something differently. Maybe there's a bit more to life.
Mm.
And maybe I just want to do a different role. Maybe I want a complete change altogether. And I think that's a very natural thing to consider around this point in time. So that's how Sham and I started to have this conversation around, maybe we can share some tips and things to consider before you just take a leap. This is
Mm.
about considering what's the best next move for you, be it internally, be it somewhere else in the company, or a different role externally, or something brand new, a complete transition away from what you're currently doing. And I thought Sham was one of the best people to help us navigate that because of all of his experience, both as a coach, but also within the talent acquisition space. And Sham, just to be really clear, your coaching is HSSB coaching. And I understand that's your initials, but also your children's initials as well, which is absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, that's right. I wasn't particularly imaginative when it came to the name, and I figured let's avoid Sham Burhm coaching, and that's what came up.
Gorgeous, gorgeous. So, Sham, I'd love you to start maybe sharing with us. I know we talked about there's probably about 5 key things that people could consider before they take the leap. I know September is a big, big movement in the recruitment world. People naturally start to want to apply for something else. And we know the great resignation has been in play now since post-COVID. So we might work through the 5 points little by little, Sham, and you might just share your expertise around what people could consider. And I might have tuppence worth to add, being in HR for 20 plus years as well, predominantly in the tech space. And then as part of my coaching, I would have seen an awful lot of people come for career coaching over the last 3 years as well. So hopefully we can share with people and it'll resonate and people can take what they want from it.
Well, no, that sounds great. And because of the complementary experience, I appreciate any questions, insights, comments you have. It's such a broad area. We could spend a long time talking about some of this stuff. So I'll do my best to keep things fairly concise. And also, I'm mindful that this isn't an approach which is formulaic and just works for everybody. They are sort of broad considerations that I think are important before perhaps actually landing the job. It may involve
Yes.
lots of activity, but so we can go through those shortly. But I agree on what you said already about the time of year and people reflecting. Summer break in particular, we used to notice peaks and troughs at certain times of the year in terms of applications for jobs. And because people take time off or pause, downtime, they're in a fun, loving, relaxing, we hope, environment, not working all the time, they can reflect on their careers, the
Yes.
trajectory, the position they're in. Perhaps you realize that, I am demotivated, but didn't realize how demotivated I was, or I'm frustrated, not being challenged enough, etc., etc. There are a plethora of reasons. So whether you're thinking of a fresh change, a transition to a different industry, or a complete career change, there are some important things or steps to consider that will help or aid in the decision making as to what to do next, so that you're effective in moving forward. You might decide actually where you are is the place to be, and take some action that way. Now, I appreciate people's circumstances vary completely, so different age ranges, backgrounds, experiences. So I just hope that there's something that people can take away from what I have to say. One thing I just briefly wanted to go through was the number of indicators or signs and emotions that people will experience, those telltale signs that you can sometimes avoid or suppress, or you just have to deal with them, right? I won't go through all of them, but one might be you start growing your role. One might be there's not enough flexibility in the job that you're doing, unfairly remunerated, or perhaps not adequately remunerated. You're not excited by what you do anymore. People are starting to leave. Strategy keeps changing. There are just tons and tons. There's probably a list of 20 or 30 to go through, but I won't. Demotivation is a key one.
Big one.
When you've lost that desire to do your job effectively, you don't want to do the 10 steps. You'll do 5 to get through.
Yeah.
That's not a good sign. Sorry.
And I think it's good to reflect on what's causing the demotivation, and it's all the things that you would have said previously. It could be a number of things, really. But if you understand where that feeling is coming from, you can maybe put a finger on the cause of it, and that might help you to make a decision. Do I stay where I am? Do I move somewhere else? Is it my boss? Is it my environment? Is it the people I'm working with? I think all of those things are really key to reflect on. It's what's causing me to feel like this. If you can put your finger on that, that's going to help you decide the best move forward.
Exactly. And actually, my first point is going to be around that. So very, very poignant that you touched on that. I will just round up what I was saying there about health. And I know that well-being is a term we come across very often these days, but I wouldn't like to imagine the number of people that are feeling highly pressurized, experiencing stress or extreme stress, and trying to work through that, struggling to sleep as a result, and who knows what other impacts are happening physiologically, not to mention around them, right? So it's a big deal. I have some experience, or I've heard of some experiences, but it's just anecdotal, right? And I wouldn't wish for it to be on anyone, which is why it's important in this regard that if things are difficult, then it's worth reflecting on, okay, what's happening? How do I best serve me so that things improve, right? Brilliant. So one of the 5 areas, I suppose, for me, the first one, or an important one, is the deep dive, or the delving into how you're feeling about your current situation.
Okay.
So a reflective question might be, or I might ask someone, how do we unravel what is causing you to want to move on to a new job, or to change industry or career? And that causing question touches on what you've said already. What is driving me to want to make such a change? Work through that. You could then start to look at things more intimately in terms of what you do, and just answer the simple question of how satisfied are you in your role right now? If you graded that as a percentage, that might not be too difficult. You might say, actually, I'm 80%, it's pretty good, and then figure out what the 20 is. But if you're low, I won't say what that number is, it's relative, then that's an indicator, right? And there are a series of steps you could work through to understand, well, how is this affecting me at work? Really knuckling that down and writing things out. I'll come back to that. How's it affecting things outside of work? Does it impact, how is it impacting others? Family, friends.
That's a good one, right?
Colleagues, yeah.
You think it's just on you, but actually, if you're demotivated and not happy going to work, that kind of energy resonates out, and people they might not have a term for it, but they'll feel something's going on, right?
For sure. Well, you know this more than I do in terms of the coaching and the discipline of coaching that you've trained in as well, with neuroscience and stuff, the physiological side. We're bundles of energy, right? And you know, you can walk into a room and you can feel energies, and you can feel when things perhaps are not quite right for someone. Anyway, we can move on from that, but that's a big topic in itself. Another simple question is about how excited you're about the role you're doing. So if you think about when you joined or when you were hired versus perhaps where you are now, when's the last time you felt excited or remotely excited about what you do?
Great one.
And I could keep going on with these questions about the risk of going on. I'll stop there. But the last point I'll make there is, you know, what are my primary concerns about making a move now?
Primary concerns about making a move now. Okay.
Because you've rattled through some other things, and then it's worth just knuckling down what that is. It could be the very reasonable aspect around risk of instability, financial security. But then there are other bits, as you know, around belief, confidence, fear.
Yes.
So I know I'm touching on surface level on these things, and they're quite deep. But
I guess, Sham, and I don't want to interrupt any of your other points, so we can move off it fairly quickly. But I guess it's establishing, is it environmental, i.e. something external to you, is your rationale for considering change, or is it something internal to me? I need a change. I need something different. I'm not happy doing what I'm doing. And you know, it might still lead to the fact that you want to exit, but I think it's a brilliant point that it's just kind of get clear on, is it me and I need to do a bit more internal coaching and searching, or is it external, is it the environment? And if I shifted the environment, that's going to help. And I don't know about you and your coaching, but very often people think it's external, when actually when they start to self-reflect and go through the questions that you've just asked, it can be something quite internal.
That has been my experience so far, that someone will show up with one thing in mind, and that's not to say that that isn't the end goal, but they'll discover all sorts of other things along the way, and the focal points will often shift as to where they pay attention to first. So yeah, very, 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 very true. I just want to mention, I said writing it down earlier, but I just skimmed over that. You know the power of the written word, right?
So powerful.
So all I'll say is that the influence of our written words, in terms of the influence on us and our subconscious, is deep. You know, if you think about listening to a news cycle again and again and how you assimilate that information, you can regurgitate it very easily, right?
Yeah.
You're taking it on board as gospel to some degree. So just imagine if you pour your own heart and mind out truthfully and thoughtfully, then what you're seeing there is gold. Might be a bit scary in terms of the realization side of it, but it's heightening your awareness.
Yeah.
You will gain value from it.
And again, there's whole neuroscience around why writing something down helps to wire and fire the neural pathways in your brain. So if you're trying to do something differently or think differently, writing it down is going to help you to move forward in that space.
I knew you would introduce an element of science into it. So yeah, absolutely right.
It's I geek out about this stuff for sure.
Yeah, no, that's cool. So first area, that digging, delving into self to understand what's going on, and so we'll leave that one to one side for now. The second point for me is around, if you understand where you are, what some of the frustrations, challenges are, how it's affecting you, well, what is it that you want to do, or what is it that you want to do instead? And you know, if you could give someone license to just freely think about that and say, forget about the constraints for a moment, imagine nothing can go wrong, what could you do? And it might not be what could you do, it might be what would you do, because there's a desire.
What would you like to do?
It's the
dream big. It's the dream. I find if you're reflecting on this kind of stuff, it's your opportunity to just dream big. You know, like you said, if all bets were off, you couldn't fail, what would you really love to do? Just consider that for 5 minutes. Allow yourself to dream big.
Yes. And I know some people we can feel resistant to wanting to do that because it feels like pie in the sky. Well, that's not going to happen, is it? How do you know? How do you know? So some of this, what is it you want to do? If we can look at it from the perspective of changing roles, you know, I want to do something similar to what I do somewhere else. I'm not happy for whatever reason. So it's what do you want to be doing? How do you want to be doing it in terms of how you deliver, whatever you're accountable for, industry, and keeping an open mind to the variety of industries. Are there specific companies in mind? The cultural side, the values, the philosophy of the company. Yeah, and maybe even asking how will making this move serve you in the longer term or the medium to long term? If you've thought that far, if you haven't laid out the sort of longer term career goals, then that's fair enough. You can do that still. But if you have something in place, like 5-10 years, I want to be X, then it can be handy to understand that, okay, by making such a move, it is actually progressing or accelerating.
It's that
forward.
step towards it. It might not be the end
Yes.
dream job, but it's a stepping stone in the right direction, and that's really key to reflect on that. Like you say, for the people who are in that space, I have a lot of people come to me and they're like, I know I want something different. I know I want to do something different, but I have no clue what that could be. And I think that's okay as well. But if you focus on the questions that we're posing, it's really going to help you to start to unearth some of this stuff. And I think I'd really love to pull out a point, Sham. One of the biggest things I use in coaching is really identifying your values so that when you look to move to a new role, to a new company, to a new industry, that you're making sure that it aligns to your values. And I think a lot of people don't do that. They're like, oh, I like a good culture. I like the sound of the values of the company. It's like, but what are your values? And the more we can live true to our values, particularly in work, because it's where we spend most of our time, it's only going to feed that sense of motivation and fulfillment and being content. And if things are not aligned to your values, that's when things can feel off. So maybe even moving back to your first point, Sham, it might be something that you delve into very early on is, what are my values? And when we ask, what are my values? It's, what are the most important things for you? And I know a lot of people don't reflect on this when they're moving to a new job or a new industry or whatever the case may be. But actually, I think it's fundamental that you do. So you're making your job work for you and that you're happy in that space, because we all deserve that.
Absolutely. No, I couldn't agree more. And, one of the when I was talking through the reasons that people, or the signs and indicators that get people even thinking about a move, one of them is that misalignment, incongruence to company philosophy or the values. The values are instantiated so that the company can deliver, operate, and they'll have a purpose, a mission. But sometimes things change strategically or through leadership or for other reasons, sustainable environmental agendas and policies. So who knows?
Totally.
It's a good way to identify what's important. I totally agree. The other thing, in the second area, as well as going through the what I want to do on a sort of bulleted list by list approach, there are other things you could do, like a skills gap assessment. Because if you're looking at what I want to do, then you'll be considering things that you're good at or have some competence in, some knowledge about, etc., etc. And doing a skills and gap assessment could be very crude. What am I very good at? To what degree? You can choose the level of competence that you want to use, and then where are the gaps, even for what I do today? And then as you're considering moves, etc., it can be, okay, well, what are the gaps to bridge? Different if it's a career change, but nonetheless, it's not insurmountable. What's transferable? And
that's my favorite version. I work a lot with transferable skills. And I'm going to say, particularly, it can be a gender issue. Dare I bring that into the mix at this stage? That a lot of women do not apply for roles unless they feel they have 100% of what their role is looking for. Yeah. Men tend to apply if they have 60%. So I think, it's not exclusive to women, by the way, but I think it can be a gender issue where women go, oh, no, I'm not very good at that. Whereas men will go, oh, I'm not too bad at it. So it's just being conscious of that and really reflecting on the facts of the situation. Where have you been given feedback in the past? Where have you performed well in the past and you've been acknowledged for that? Is make it fact-based and not kind of mindset-led. And don't hold yourself back just because you don't have 100% of what they're looking for. It's be aware of where your skill set lies and your competencies, but it's also really considering all of the experience you have is transferable in one way, shape, or form.
Yes, I absolutely agree. And you know, I've witnessed some of this, and actually the positive progress that has been made, or certainly there's evidence around of things that are happening. More will happen and needs to happen, but steps are being made. And I know that in terms of the application rate, you're right. There's that tendency to take the risk, even though you're not fully complying with everything that's required. And then, like you say, that general pattern has been observed. And I think one thing organizations are doing now is not only selling stories, not selling, but they're kind of promoting the positive stories of graduates who've come up through the ranks, or people that are making significant impacts, women in leadership or on the board, or CEOs. So lots of great stories that are being shared, and hopefully that will assist. And also the way that they go to market to attract. I think there's a shift in language and what's proposition in terms of here's what the role's about and this is what we're looking for.
Brilliant.
But yeah, so some good points there. And I'll just finish off by saying another thing, which is if you're thinking about a job move and what it is you want to do, then try not to conceptualize the perfect job, because you will, I don't know this for sure, but you might narrow your scope, you might narrow your thinking and your imaginative side. If you start to target, so like, oh, I only want to do this with this job title, you'd be surprised what you might be able to do because of the complexities of organizations and supply chains. You just don't know. You might find a really great job. So look at it holistically, you know, incorporate the factors and elements that you've already identified as important, the values, and also some of the more tangible aspects. And if you're thinking of a career change, then I think the contemplation of a career change itself is valuable and insightful. Whether you might decide that it's just an event which has taught you something, and that you don't actually do anything about it, but you kind of do wherever you are, perhaps, or that you make a significant transition. So the opportunity to pause, reflect, better understand yourself, understand your values, like you said, you know, that whole mindset evolution, understanding your primary motivations, and to really have them front of mind more often than not is a great thing. And you can accomplish career change successfully, sometimes with less upheaval than you think. I think career transitions or changes can be hugely transformational for people, because something that I didn't touch on earlier, which is who do you see yourself as in the future? And if you're thinking of a career change, or if it's career related, then who do you want to become? Or who are you in the future? That becomes an interesting question for people to contemplate as part of a career change or a job change. So, you know, whether it's in your career and life, not just your career, it has effects on your life. What do you want to be doing? How will you be doing it? How does it benefit on you, and how does it affect people around you? So a life-altering decision, I know that it's easy for me to say it in a very matter-of-fact way. I know it comes with, there's a great risk in taking the decision, but the rewards are potentially huge.
Yes, completely.
And don't let fear, not don't let fear, but try not to let fear be the guide for all of the choices you make.
Again, in neuroscience, we very much talk about being reward-led. And I think that would be a really important point around, don't let fear be the deciding factor, to your point just now, but lead with reward. What's the best that can happen? If I was to move, what could it give me I don't have today? I think people naturally lead with fear if they're unhappy, or they're feeling burnout, or they're not getting on with their boss, and so they feel the need to jump maybe into the unknown, and that might not be the best thing. It's when you stop and reflect and cover off the points that you're making today, Sham, you can make a much more informed decision, but let it be a reward decision. I'm moving because I want to move. I'm moving because it's going to be a really good career move for me. I'm moving because I'm going to be happier. And not, oh my God, I need to get away from my boss, or oh my God, this company no longer aligns with what I need. I hate my job, whatever. It's try and move into the reward space of what this is going to give you and what an amazing impact it can have in your life. And again, it's just, sorry, I keep coming back to it. It's the neuroscience, it's the psychology around, and I know you're trained in psychology as well. The psychology around moving with the strengths-based approach. What will this give you that's good as opposed to running from?
Yeah, I totally agree. And that part about the risk taking and not letting fear be the guide for all your choices, I'd also say that when it comes to making big changes, and particularly career changes, that we cannot become what we want by remaining what we are.
Ooh,
that's not
I like
mine,
that.
that's something I've pinched. Okay, so it's not a profound sham statement.
Tell me more. I love it.
Well, it's indicating that becoming what we want, that is straight away that it's implying that there is a vision there, and that you're not exactly where you want to be, and you're not who you want to be, coming back to the point I made earlier as well. And so staying in status quo and the misery that goes with it for some people and all the other issues, then nothing will happen. So that was a quote by Max Dupree, who's a
love that.
a US businessman. I think he wrote a book, something called Leadership as Art, or Leadership is Art, or something.
Okay.
I love that quote because it's simple. I struggle with multi-sentence quotes, so simple is good.
Me too. Another one that works is nothing will change unless you're willing to change.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And they go nice hand in hand together. So we can finish that bit with those, I think.
Perfect. Okay, and I think we're moving to point number 4.
Point number 3. This is around CVs.
Oh yes.
So gets into a bit more of the practical, but I won't say this is what to do. It's more a case of it's really important to invest quality time in developing and refining your CV. We have old versions that we dust off and then update the latest position and dish out. Some of you might have very polished CVs, and that's great, but I would reiterate and refine them every time. No matter if it's just a sentence or two that changes, every single time for every application, I would refine some aspect of it so that it's more closely aligned with what's been asked for.
Yeah, that makes sense.
If it's an internal application, you could argue that it's already set out that way to some degree, but even then, there'll be aspects of the job you're applying for that you should aim it to be closer to. It's a tool, remember. I think CVs have been seen as, this is my document laying out my history, so it's my chronology. Whereas actually, especially in this day and age, it's your sales pitch. I don't really like to use that word. It's your branding document.
Your elevator pitch kind of thing.
It's your personal branding document. That makes the biggest impression, and then it's on the back of that you will be invited to interview or for a phone screen, unless it's a referral, in which case there's extra credibility sometimes through the referral process. But so the CV as a tool, pay real attention to refining it and developing it. Get some advice. There are tons of tips online about what you can do. I would say some of the key things to watch out for are perhaps using the skills and gap assessment I mentioned earlier. You can use that to feed into it. So it all kind of starts to link in. You understand values, motivators, interests, those things, and then you're clear on what it is you want to do, where, how, and then it's like, okay, well then how do I prepare to make the next step of getting out there and presenting myself? Well,
brilliant.
You need to talk to people, but outside of that, you need to present them with the best version of you on paper. So summarize and highlight your core skills, the level of competence, experiences, anything that's very relevant to the company or organization you're applying to, which is why it's important to refine it. If you spot something that they're looking for, you need to say how you can address that without lying, right? It's not about fibbing. It's about saying, okay, you're wanting someone to execute a complex range of programs under another broader umbrella of, say, sustainability or whatever it might be, or a tech project. And the language that you use and the way you put your skills across need to demonstrate that you can not only run projects, you can handle programs that are complex and deal with the intricacies of that, the risks associated, the influencing that's required across stakeholders that you do not manage, dealing with challenges as they come along the way, but you need to do that in such a succinct way by saying, well, I've done this. I've executed programs worth X over this period of time successfully.
I always advise my clients to consider using the language from the job spec, not so that it's like plagiarized, but you know, like you said, complex projects, complex programs, that you actually use that terminology in your CV when you're applying for it, because it naturally helps the recruiter to go, complex problems, complex problems. Okay, let me go a bit deeper. It sounds like they might have what we're looking for. And it just really helps with that initial selection phase when they have very little to go on other than, does this person have skills on paper? And of course, I'm ex-LinkedIn, so I'm going to have to say, and your LinkedIn profile should reflect all that too, but it's probably more generic. But I think it's a great point to make, Sham. You absolutely have to help the recruiter to see, because it's usually the recruiter as opposed to the line manager, depending, first, to see that you have what it takes to move forward to the next phase.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and you know, you're absolutely right. I was going to say, you know, mirror the job description in terms of the language it uses. So you've said pretty much the same thing. So thank you, and avoid using jargon, which is another way of saying mirroring their language. So less of your language, especially corporate acronyms and things that throw people. You cannot assume that they will understand that. So find the interconnection between what they're referring to and what you're doing, and then use that language. And also, it'll help to beat the bots in terms of the usage and the adoption of AI for applicant tracking systems. If they're working to the company's language and the job descriptions and etc., they will filter things out that, you know, match less.
Okay,
so
I know that.
Yeah, but so it's just an added benefit. It's not a case of do this to make that happen. It's, if you do it, it's good for you in the first place.
Naturally,
but
okay.
It has an added benefit of gets you through potentially.
Brilliant.
Yeah, so I'd say summarizing, highlighting your core skills, experience level, anything that's significant and quantifiable as an achievement that you can put over to the prospective employer. Emphasize transferable skills, because there will be gaps. No one's perfect. So where there are gaps and you can see them, you can bring in something that's transferable. So if you haven't led a small team and that's what they need, but you ran complex programs, projects, or had to handle teams indirectly, then bring that in.
Amazing.
Without highlighting the fact that you've not managed people. What else was I going to say? Oh, do not rely on the one CV, which I've already kind of touched on, but yeah, please make it iterative.
Refine where possible.
Yeah, so I'll stop there on the CV one, because again, we could get into the weeds, but the fourth one, if you want.
Please.
Networking, researching, and personal discipline. So, you know, earlier you said something that was on my mind, which is around funneling. Did you say funneling? Yeah. So when you're looking out and you're investigating and exploring, you may as well look wide as opposed to looking narrow. You know, why would you keep extremely narrow? Because then the chances of something from that are potentially smaller. Whereas if you go wide, it's more work, potentially more conversations, but who knows what you might discover, especially if you're looking for a transition of industry. So go wide to serve, to funnel. Use the power of LinkedIn, which we talked about as the professional networking forum, to therefore update your profile, which you've already mentioned, so that was great, thank you. And you're looking to expand your existing network and gather insights, which you can through groups, conversations, connections, and potentially articles that you might read about organizations. If you have a company in mind, then look for people that are doing the role that you're interested in.
Brilliant.
Just literally look online in LinkedIn for their profiles, and you'll find that person or a group of them, and then you'll find people that are similar in terms of the profile. It often shows on the right, and you can then at least start to imagine or conceive of other possibilities that are connected.
Brilliant.
And they're networking opportunities too, these people. So that's a good idea. Then I would say, once you've found an organization that you want to apply for, then it goes without saying, research the role, research the company. Is this somewhere that you think you would be better off and happier than where you are? What are the indicators for that? What are the signs? And what can you do to find out a bit more? And then if you're looking to enter a new industry, then you could find groups or specialist communities that perhaps are, well, running little forums around that particular area, associations, and try and have conversations with such people. And I heard someone say something not long ago, which I quite liked, so I'll pinch it, which was something around creating your own lucky encounters. By being curious and having conversations, whether it's for the similar type of role or a complete change, if you have curious conversations with new networks or just people in and around your circles, then you don't know where that might take you. And if you show an interest in people's careers and their stories and start to share your own, you just never know what might come from that. Someone might invite you to apply for something or say, oh, well, we're thinking of doing X, I'll mention you to my boss.
Brilliant. I was just going to say there, my whole career, Sham, the word networking used to make me shudder. It just felt off to me. It never felt like, it was always like, oh, I'm trying to sell myself, or oh my God, I'm kind of like pushing myself into this conversation to be seen, or whatever the case may be. That was my definition of networking. But actually, it wasn't until I left the corporate world and I'm now in the coaching business, I realized that that's not necessarily networking at all. And I love the term that you use, getting curious about it. And somebody said it to me one time, it's like, networking is not about you selling yourself, it's about getting curious about the other person and understanding what's going on for them, understanding their role, understanding what their priorities are or pressures are. And of course, that fundamentally changed my ability to show up networking, because now it wasn't about me at all. And that made me feel so much better. I was like, oh my God, I had it all wrong for this whole time. It's really about getting curious about the other person. You naturally engage at that level. And then a nice conversation ensues, and it doesn't have to be anything other than a conversation. And you might remember that person at a point in time for something that you need or want, or a role that's available, and vice versa. But you've made this beautiful connection as opposed to this sales pitch that I would have kind of defined networking for in the past.
Too true, too true. I think the curiosity sends a positive message too. The intention behind it is a good one, is a positive one. Hopefully it will deliver exactly the things you've said. So that's fine. And then my final point around this sort of networking, researching, I said discipline, didn't I? Personal discipline. And what I mean by that is not, I've seen people put more effort into buying a car or going on holiday than to apply for a job. And I've probably done that myself, right? And I know anecdotally, I know this, and I've seen evidence of it. You can see it in applications sometimes. So I would say treat the job search itself, or the transition or the move, as work. So you're doing extra work. Think of the payoff, right? It's well worth it. It's worth the effort. And also, I would say, if you treat it as work, it introduces an element of focus, generates some momentum, and then you can keep moving. And then that might that could lead to you spending less time in the company that you're in. There's a danger that you'll extend the amount of time you're with a company or not happy or demotivated because of the approach you take to accomplishing the next step, right? So if you treat it as work, chances are you're going to hold yourself accountable.
Got it. So it's like you're investing up front, investing time, effort, and energy, because the payoff's going to be quicker, better, and more in line with what you want. And you then get out of the environment that you've been describing the reasons why, and into a space that's far more aligned with what you want.
Absolutely. And I'd also encourage people to think in the sense that there is no such thing as a trivial action here. So when you're, if you do one action a day, which is for 10 minutes, and it's a repetitive one for 5 days over a week, then that's work to find work, or it's work to that career position that you're looking to move
an investment, as you say.
Absolutely. So and then also you get a sense of reward, satisfaction. You've done it for the day, and you've done it 5 days in the trot, and each one will lead to something. If you fall flat on your face, you can argue there's a change you need to make to your approach, but
there's a learning there.
And I think the only thing I would say is, remember that you don't have control over how long organizations take to go through the cycle.
That's a challenge in and of itself. It's managing self in that space sometimes. That can be really, really hard.
It can frustrate people, and I know what it's like to be on the other end of that. You do have control over how you approach the job search process, though, which is why treating it as work just allows you to maintain momentum, even though organizations are dragging their heels in going through the process. It's not always their fault, it's just the nature of the beast sometimes. But sometimes they do take long to draw things out. And then final area, so if all this is happening, then the chances are you will have submitted a CV or networked to the point where someone wants to talk to you, and it's being ready for that call. So you might want to call it an interview, but normally before an interview, there is a screening call or a get to know you call or something to that effect. And that's a brilliant, wonderful opportunity to make a memorable and positive impression on someone. It's a prospective employer. You want to impress them without being false about anything. But you can be you. That's the beautiful thing about this. It's not an orchestrated, structured interview, but you need to be ready for it. And this goes back to the work previously done, the whole understanding of where you are, what you're doing, what you want to do, how you're feeling, what drives you, your refining of the CV, the skills gaps analysis, the transitionary skills that you can take, the transferable skills you can take. If you have an understanding of all that, you can articulate that much better as part of this conversation, because the goal is to get to the next step, right? Providing you don't learn something on the call that makes you think, oh, this isn't the company I thought that I want to be at. So
I think that's a really important point. Again, I know when I'm talking to my clients, sometimes I'd say you are 50% of the decision-making process here. You make this work for you. It's as much about you finding out about the role, your manager, the environment, the culture, and then you self-selecting yourself in or out. Yes, the business is 50% selecting you in or out as well, but you are not a passive, passenger here. You're categorically deciding if this is the right one for you. And, it's not necessarily about, oh, thank you so much, and I'm just going to go along with this for the ride. Is make that informed decision. Actually, you know what, this doesn't fit with my values, or this doesn't fit with what I was hoping it was going to be. So then you decide, you self-select yourself out, and don't waste any more time or energy. Or as you said earlier, get a little bit curious, like, I'm not sure about this, I'm going to find out a little bit more. And so you stay in the process and you find out more.
Absolutely. And, if you self-select out, then that's not a job that you didn't get.
Yes, completely. It's right? You've made that informed decision for you. Love that.
That's a great thing. I would say, where possible, arrange the calls, not to your liking, but to a mutually agreed time, right? Because you can be called and you're in the middle of something. I would avoid taking a screening call and saying, I'll just dash out to my car. If it's a proper screening call, make sure you've arranged a different time that works for you, because otherwise it's all to their benefit. They're getting you at the first attempt. You're not getting to rock up on top form.
Great point.
So I'd say do that. Have the JD to hand, or have it printed or digitally available, so that if you were going to do a call, that it's accessible for you.
The job description.
Just to have a look at. Just be familiar with the terminology and the accountability, etc. And then all the work in these earlier stages, I believe, should help you to prepare a well-articulated summary elevator pitch, so that you can confidently rattle that off with, so that it makes a positive impression on the call. And if you're given feedback on a call, or you get the impression that, okay, they're not going to take me forward, or perhaps they even say it, that there's something not quite aligned and therefore they're not likely to progress you, they might say that, then it's fine to ask. Just stay professional, stay calm, and just ask them, could you help me to understand what is specifically it is that's missing from my experience and background, or what is it that I've shared or not shared? And they might offer something, they might not, and then it gives you the chance to quickly put something in if you think, I missed that one vital thing, and I have it. And then it might be enough to make them think, oh, okay, well, that does change things.
Yeah.
So I would do that.
But also I think it's you learning something from this experience that you can bring to the next one where you just, go in bigger, better, stronger. So this might not have been the best performance or whatever term you want to use there, or the best selling that you did of yourself. But if you can learn something from the experience, then it's only a good thing. You only have learned a lesson. You take that forward to the next one. It just meant it wasn't that right role for you. It doesn't mean you can't bring that learning to the next one and do even better.
That's right, absolutely right. And it's okay to express your desire to work for a company as well, because if it hasn't worked out and it's genuine and both sides are accepting of that, you may have seen one or two jobs on their portal, or perhaps you're just inquiring. But look, I really would love to work for your organization. What you're doing strikes a chord with me. I think I'd be highly invested. I could make an impact. I'd like to grow. Love what you're doing. And if there is something similar that you might be able to consider me for, or put me in touch with another member of your broader team, I would really appreciate that. Brilliant. What's the worst that can happen as a result of saying that?
Yeah. What's the best? What's the worst? What's the best is they go, oh, you know what? There might be something else we can consider him or her for.
Yeah, it happens because I can say firsthand that sometimes we will do it as recruiters. Other times they'll actively ask.
Brilliant.
So they're the 5 things kind of in a nutshell, and each one has many layers underneath.
Yes.
And
we could probably talk forever about so much of this, Sham, but in the interest of time, we've been talking for quite a while. I might just get you to sum up the 5 points, maybe one sentence each, so that we can conclude it. If you were to sum up the 5 points, what would that look like?
Okay, so I would say the first one is delving into how you're feeling about your current work situation. So unraveling what is causing you to want to move on to a new job, change industry, career, and it's going through a series of investigative questions to reflect on, what's important to me, what do I value most, how satisfied am I here, how's it affecting me at work, how's it affecting me outside of work, what are my concerns about making a move, etc., etc. So it's really diving deep into that. The next one is, what is it that you want to do, and to understand the what, how, where, for who, what's important about where you end up, or where you aim to go, should we say. Doing a skills and gap analysis as a result of that, seeing what's transferable, and if you're contemplating a career change, just to actually use the contemplation itself as a valuable opportunity to learn about whether it indeed is something you want to do and how it will serve you longer term. The third one was about the CV and refining it and developing it. So all I'd say is it's well worth the effort, spending the time to refine it in the first place, make it as impactful as possible, but then to dynamically update it for the applications as you go along, mirror the language of organization that you apply to, and perhaps take out things that are not relevant. Actually, that's something I didn't say earlier, but perhaps take out things that are less relevant, and avoid using the jargon because it will help you to beat the box as well. So we'll move on to then the fourth one: networking, research, personal discipline. So feeding the funnel, go wide, narrow things in, network with professionals, discover who's doing the type of role that you would like to be doing, use that to leverage further connections, have conversations, be curious.
And not get tied to job title. I meant to say that earlier. Job title is almost irrelevant. Just go a bit deeper in terms of the definition behind.
Correct.
Sorry.
Yeah. Good point. Do not get hung up on job titles. And create your own lucky encounters through curious discussions with others, and see what you can learn and what that might lead to. Maintain discipline. Treat your search as work. And then the fifth one, being ready for the call. So be as ready as you can. Use all the work done previously to prepare yourself to present yourself as best you can. Your goal is to progress to the next stage, providing that's where you want to be employed. Arrange calls when they suit you as well. Don't just take them on the fly if possible. And don't be afraid to ask for feedback or put yourself forward for other potentially interesting roles in the organization.
Amazing. Thank you, Sham. So just to remind you, Sham is from HSSB Coaching, predominantly focusing on career coaching. Is that fair to say, Sham?
Yes, it tends to then delve sometimes into aspects of life coaching, but I would
Of
say
course, I think that's a given. Yeah,
predominantly
yeah.
career coaching, yes.
Okay, fantastic. And it's been such a pleasure talking to you, Neve from B Coaching Solutions. If you want to know more or delve into any of the topics raised, then by all means, please feel free to reach out to Sham directly or reach out to myself, and we will be happy to have a no obligation 30-minute call with you so we can talk a little bit more around it. But by all means, use the 5 points made here to help you make an informed decision. And we will be dropping a tip sheet with this information on it on our LinkedIn page over the next day or two as well. So hope you found this useful. Enjoy. Thank you, Sham.
Pleasure.